Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Chris, and in today's video I've got 4 more fall DIYs, hopefully that will inspire you and get you to create. So let's start with DIY number 1. Alright, so I have got this large wood round. I picked these wood rounds up at Amazon. I'll be sure to link those in the description box, but they're just a real thin wood. I got the new Autumn Blessing stamps from IOD, and I just want to go ahead and play around with that. Now, the masks are a little bit different in this stamp set. They've actually got them highlighted where you can see them better. So when you lay them down on your pieces, you could use it kind of as a visual of what your project's going to look like. And I like this feature. I like to use the masks for that reason. But after I popped those all out, I went ahead and laid them out on my board just to see how it would look. And I wanted to make this one easy just to show you. You can buy a whole stamp set and it'll look good if you place it in a little collage. So I'm going to grab Basil from Paint Couture, and I am going to give my board one full coat of this color all over, excluding the back. I got that coat on, I didn't like how rough it looked and felt, so I'm just going to grab me a 220 sponge, and I'm going to go ahead and just sand that down, wipe off the dust. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add one more coat of that paint. Once that paint's dried, I'm going to go ahead and grab my clear liquid patina and just a sponge and apply that all over to protect our paint. And then once that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and grab my black ink, and I'm going to start with the center stamp, and I'm going to go ahead and coat that with my ink and then just place that right in its spot. And when you're pressing on these, don't do what I've always done. Don't press too hard. Otherwise, you're going to get a smudgy appearance. So just lightly make sure every piece has made contact, and look how good that looks. And then I got smart. I've got some of those hard plastic, God, I can't never think of what they're called, but you'll see here in a second. So I went ahead and decided I'm just going to lay my stamps down in the spot where they're going to go, and then I'm going to take that little hard plastic piece. You can also use one of those plastic cutting boards from the Dollar Tree. This just happens to be one from IOD. I alternate between the two. And then I'm just going to lay them over my stamps and allow them to pick up my stamps. And then I'm going to go ahead and coat my stamps with this ink all at one time. And then I'm just going to flip it over and I'm going to lay it right down, making sure to just kind of smooth over those stamps with my hands, fingers lightly, and lift up, and look at that. So much easier than individually. Now I'm just going to grab my Apothecary stamps, and I'm going to spell out the word thankful. And I'll just use my little hard plastic piece and lift those letters up all in one swoop, apply my black ink, and place it in position. Just kind of wiggle my fingers over it and lift up. And this project is complete. It's simple, it's easy. So for those of you that maybe have one of those stamp books, try to make a collage out of it. I am going to dry this down with my heat gun. Once it's set, that IOD ink is permanent, so no need to seal. And now let's move on to DIY number 2. Right, so this one's going to be simple. Look at this and tell me what you all see. Because when I was staring at this, I saw a scarecrow. I don't know, it looked like a little scarecrow head, and it looked like his little hat. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make something that I can place in like a planter or something with some florals or whatever. I'm just going to play around with it and see what I can come up with. And I'm going to grab the color Linen. This is a folk art matte paint, and I just get these from Hobby Lobby. I'm just going to grab one of my small chippy brushes, and I'm just going to paint right around this area with that color. And this is going to be another very easy, simple project, just an easy way to take a piece of a spindle and turn it into some decor. And once I get that paint on, I'm just going to go around with a baby wipe and wipe up any of the over paint that I may have got on there. I want this paint color just to be focused right in that area for his face. After that paint is dried down, I'm going to go ahead and with a pencil just kind of draw out a face. Now, I'm not an artist, guys. I'm doing the best I can. So don't laugh too hard at his face when I'm finished. We'll just draw that out. Once I get his face drawn out, I've got these styluses, and I'm going to go ahead and take the stylus with the smallest tip, almost at like a little point. And I'm going to use that and dip it in my paint. And then I'm going to trace over my pencil marks for his eyes and his mouth. And then I'm going to grab Summer Crush and I'm going to use that to paint in his nose with that same stylus. And once I've got his face all dried down, I'm going to go ahead and take some of this raffia and I'm just going to grab a long piece and tie that right around the top point there, which is going to be serving as his hat. And at first I thought, well, maybe I'll put him in a bow, and that's like, no. Let's untie this. I'm going to go ahead and first start by trimming that down just a little bit because that is way too long. And then I'm just going to kind of peel the pieces back. It's like kind of like shredding it back. And so it's just going to give it more little straggly pieces. And then I'm going to grab my hot glue gun and I'm just going to put a little dot of hot glue. That way this little piece here where I tied it is going to stay in place. It's going to stay in position. And I'm just going to play around with that raffia a little bit more. Once I get it to my liking, I'll trim it down just a little bit more. And then I am going to go ahead and I'm going to grab one of those paper sunflowers that I have been using so far for a lot of my fall projects. And I'm going to glue that right in the center of the raffia. And that's going to be it for this easy project. And don't forget, I show all my reveals at the end. So let's go ahead and move on to DIY number 3. All right, so I've got this wood piece here. It's like a wood plank that you would plank, I guess, like on the wall or maybe flooring. I don't know, it kind of snaps together. But anyway, this measures 11.5 by 3.5. And I'm going to grab the color Autumn Sage from Paint Couture. And I am going to go ahead and give this 2 full coats of that color. And I'm going to make sure I also get the sides as well. Next, I've got one of these little square wood palettes that you can pick up from the Dollar Tree. And I've got some Waverly antiquing wax. I'm going to add to just a little bowl and add some water to it and use this as a stain. And I'm going to stain this palette all the way around, making sure to get as far into the inside as I possibly can, because I know that with these little slats that run across, you'll be able to see if it's not stained. It'll just kind of show through. So the best way to get down in there is just with a small paintbrush and just do the best you can. Once I get that stain on, I will wipe away any excess with just a paper towel. And I'm going to set that aside to dry. And I've got some of these wood biscuits. And I've got the number 10 wood biscuits here. And on both ends, they're kind of flat. So I'm just going to round them off. And then I'm going to grab the color Queen Bee from DIY Paint. And I am going to paint each one of these little wood biscuits in this color. Now you're going to need to have a stick of some sort and a large brown button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brown button as the center of our flower, and then these little wood biscuits are going to be our petals for our sunflower. And then that little stick I have is going to be the stem. And of course, if you don't have a stick, you could always use one of those little wood brown dowel pieces as well. But I like to first start out by laying all the pieces out to make sure that the height for our wood palette is going to be up high enough, down low enough, whatever the case may be. I just want to make sure everything fits just fine before I start gluing. And once I'm happy with the way it looks, I'm just going to take a pencil and mark below that palette where I'm going to want to place it. That way all the pieces will line up just right once I remove them. So I'm going to grab some Tite Bond Quick and Thick, and that's what I'm going to use to adhere my wood palette to our little plank piece. And you can also go ahead and add a little dab of hot glue in here for that immediate hold, which I didn't do on this. I did it on the petals. And I'll just place that palette right above my little pencil line. And then I'll just place something heavy on top of it to keep it in place while it dries. And the stuff dries pretty quick when you put a thin layer. And when that palette's dry enough, I'm just going to stick my little stick back in there, and then I'll grab my Titebond Quick and Thick and have some hot glue ready. And I am going to just adhere all these pieces with both. And once everything is glued down, I'm just going to grab some clear wax, and I am going to go over the entire piece with my clear wax, with the exception of the wood palette, because I have another plan for that. Next, I'm going to grab some brown wax, and I use Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax, and I am going to go over my piece with this brown wax, just kind of darkening it up a bit. And this is going to help give it a little bit more definition, make it look a little bit more rustic. And because we have that clear wax down, wiping away any excess brown wax will be easy peasy. Next, I'm just going to grab me some Spanish moss, and I'm just going to lay it right here, and I'll just grab some hot glue and a little silicone spatula, and I will place that Spanish moss right where I want it. And I do trim away any of the flyaways, anything that looks a little out of place. I'll just trim that off with some scissors. And if I felt like a spot was a little too bare, I'll just apply more hot glue and add a little bit more Spanish moss. And I felt like the bottom just needed a little something. And now that I'm thinking about it, I have some acorns I could have very well glued down there, but I'm just going to pick a few of these little florals off of this fall pick I got from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to stick them right in there. No glue needed. They just fit in there nice and securely. Now I'm going to grab the Apothecary stamps, and I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do on this piece. I just felt like it needed something. So I'm going to use this stamp right here, the very top one, and I am just going to ink it up with some black, and I'm just going to stamp on the very bottom plank. And yes, that stamp doesn't fit on there perfectly, but it gives it enough for what I'm going to do next. And that is, I'm going to go ahead and spell out the word harvest with my Apothecary letters. And I just like to lay the letters out. That way I make sure that they're nice and lined up. And then I'll take that little hard backing piece and I will grab the letters with that, stamp the letters up, and stamp it in. Now let's move on to DIY number 4. All right, so I have another one of these wood rounds, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I do believe I saved the best for last. So I am going to start by grabbing the Cloches mold, and you're also going to need the sunflower mold for this one. But I'm just going to pat in my clay into this mold here, and I'm pretty much just doing the upper half of it. I'm leaving the finial part out. I don't need that part. And once I get that in and flip it over, I am going to be using some water on my fingers to try to smooth that top out. And well, you see there, I actually got that finial part in and I just cut it off with a butter knife. And then I'm just going to lay that on my board, see how much room I have. I did not get it on film, but I did end up cutting about the top quarter, maybe just a little under a half of this off. And then I realized that this is going to need a bottom. I need a base. This is going to be a flower pot. So I'm just going to take the bottom of one of these cloche molds and I am just going to cut that out, and I will play around with it later. But here I've got some 15 millimeter half beads, and I decided I'm just going to put those all around the outer edge of this wood round. And you see here, I just kind of used some water and I got the two pieces stuck together on this. And I'm going to take some Titebond Quick and Thick and apply that to the back, rubbing it all over with my fingertip, and place it right down where I want it to go. And then I also have made some of these little stems, and I made the leaf out of the sunflower mold, and I'm just going to place those where I want. I've got this little sunflower bud, and I'll just go ahead and adhere those down with that Tite Bond Quick and Thick. And when I pat this down, I pat down very lightly because I don't want to distort the castings any. And I just want to make sure everything is nice and adhered to the wood. Well, after I placed those in, I still had the large sunflower mold, and I had to actually wait for that to defrost because I did pop it in the freezer because I found that doing so helps releasing those castings from the mold so much easier. But I had to let it defrost, and by that time my other pieces were about getting dry, so that's why you'll see the different shades of the gray clay. But once I get the glue on that, I'm just going to press it into my wood round. And next I'm going to grab the color Farmhouse Linen from Paint Couture, and I am going to go ahead and paint this entire piece with one coat. And then once I get that covered, I do have to go fix dinner, so I'm going to leave that aside to dry overnight. And the next day, I'm going to grab the color Elephant. This is a Waverly chalk paint, and I'm going to pour some in a bowl, and then I'm just going to go ahead and add some baking soda to that. I just kind of want to thicken it up a little bit, and then I'm going to cover my flower pot in this. I want it to have that stone-like appearance, you know, those planters that you see sitting outside. And as I'm putting that on, it just doesn't seem to have the thickness and texture that I want. So as I'm patting my brush on top, I'm going to take my heat gun and kind of get it to dry faster. That way, when I'm pressing into that paint and it's moving that paint around, it's going to dry that paint down, giving it that texture that I'm looking for. All right, next I'm going to move on to the color Layered Chocolate, and anywhere that I think there should be brown, I'm just going to go ahead and paint that in, which includes the center of the sunflower and the stems. Then I'm going to grab the color Queen Bee, and I'm going to go ahead and paint in all of my sunflower petals. And then I'm going to grab the color Aviary and paint in just the little leaves. All right, once I get that all dried down, I am going to take some clear wax, and then I want to cover my flowers with this. I noticed that when I would go over the brown, it would kind of bleed onto my brush, and that color would kind of expand to the yellow of the sunflowers, which I was not hating. So just keep that in mind. And once I get that entire piece covered with my wax, I am going to take light brown sugar antiquing glaze from Paint Couture, and I am just going to go over the wood round itself. I just want it to have a little bit more of an aged appearance, so I will go over that, including the beads. And then I'll just kind of blot up a little bit of the excess with a baby wipe. Next, I grabbed some Layered Chocolate, added a little bit of water, and I thought I would give the pot itself a little bit of discoloration. And then I'm going to go around the beads, just giving it a little bit more of a rustic appearance. So I've got the textured stamp, and I am going to grab one of these stamps here, and I am just going to take my Layered Chocolate that I've got watered down on a little sponge dauber, and I am just going to kind of sponge that over my stamp, and I'm just going to apply that texture throughout on the wood round, giving it more of a rustic appearance. And this is the first time I've ever used this stamp. This is the first time I've ever stamped with paint, and I think it actually turned out pretty good. You guys will have to let me know what you think. All right, then I'm going to grab the letterpress stamps, and this is the first time I've used this one too. I've actually had it for a little while, but I'm going to go ahead and I want to spell out the word blessed. So I'm going to do that right here with some black ink. And I've got my letters spaced out here because there's only one letter of each. So I had to just space out accordingly, but I will go ahead and stamp, and then I will grab the same two letters to go here and just repeat the process. And sorry if you hear any squeaking in the background. My dog is playing with a squeaky ball. She just always seems to want to squeak that toy when I am recording. All right, and this is what we've got. I think this looks fantastic, but we're not quite done yet. Next, I've got the color Raw Sienna from Folk Art Paint, and I decided this pot just needed a little bit more of a rusty appearance, so I just kind of dab that here and there. Then I'm going to grab some Spanish moss, and I want to apply that to the top of the planter. And then I am going to grab some brown wax by Dixie Belle, and I am just going to kind of go around the edges of my piece, kind of shadowing it. And when I'm shadowing it, especially around the pot, I kind of want it a little bit more smudgy, if that makes sense. So I just kind of take the brown wax, and then I'll take a brush that has some of my excess clear wax on it, or remaining clear wax on it, and just kind of rub over it a little bit to lighten it down and to mute it down a little bit, but still leaving a smudgy appearance. So I just play around with this for a little bit. I do clear it all with a clear wax, and then it will be complete, and you'll see the final reveal here. And you guys have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you next week. Let me know in the comments which of these is your favorite.